Welcome aboard the Just Help Out Mindset podcast, where your compassionate guide, Nicole Venegas, takes the helm. Brace yourselves for an immersive experience as we delve into the heart of crucial conversations. We're set to explore the intricacies of suicide prevention, navigate the landscape of mental health, and boldly shatter the stigma surrounding therapy. This isn't just a podcast, it's an odyssey of resilience and understanding. Join us on this transformative journey filled with stories, insights, and a collective mission to create a world that embraces the strength of empathy and helping others. Fasten your seatbelts. We're about to embark on a voyage towards a healthier, more compassionate existence.
Welcome, listeners. I'm your host, Nicole Venegas. This podcast is named after our nonprofit called the Just Help Out Foundation, which is located in Tampa, Florida, and was created from a pure tragedy. My brother died by suicide on May 3rd of 2022, and that horrific day will be forever etched in my brain. A few days before he did it, he said he was feeling hopeless, so our nonprofit organization helps anyone in the community who may be feeling hopeless. And everyone that we help in the community is called a Joey. So far, after being around for 1 year, we have been able to help almost 50 Joeys since our inception, from homelessness, hunger, domestic violence, and mental health. The purpose of this podcast is to explore mental health in its entirety and to let everyone know you are not alone. If you think you are the only one suffering from anxiety, depression, OCD, panic disorder, agoraphobia, I challenge you to think again. I am also a mental health professional and see clients daily who are strong and courageous, and they have decided to talk about their feelings and process unturned stones in their lives. I hope you will do the same with me here today. Welcome to episode 7 of the Just Help Out Mindset podcast. Today, I am joined in the studio by the wonderful Cathi Hodge. This is going to be an amazing episode because she specializes in grief, which is, of course, the whole premise of the nonprofit and the whole premise of this podcast. Cathi is a licensed mental health counselor. She specializes in grief, trauma, and addiction, which I think we can all agree go hand in hand. She holds an MS in mental health counseling from Nova Southeastern University and established her private practice in 2016. She gained extensive experience in substance abuse facilities and hospitals, and she is trained in accelerated resolution therapy, also known as ART, which I'm very excited to talk about also. It is an innovative and effective trauma therapy, and she is also very well trained in internal family systems, which is a transformative approach to understanding the internal dynamics of thoughts and emotions. Wouldn't that be nice to understand your thoughts and emotions? This unique combination allows Cathi to provide a tailored approach to support the healing process. Her journey into counseling is deeply personal. It originated from a transformative experience that led to a career change after 20 years in engineering. Her innate problem-solving abilities have discovered a more profound purpose in a profession that fosters genuine connections and directly impacts people's lives. Cathi believes that everyone has the answers deep within them, and sometimes they just need a little assistance in discovering them. Cathi, thank you so much for being here and welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
I am so excited to have you in the studio, and you know, the fact that you really focus on grief and trauma, which as a mental health professional myself, I see this happening so much in so many people, and they don't want to talk about it. They just let it fester, and they ignore the trauma that happened when they were younger, and they push it aside and they suppress it. So in your own practice, what kind of things are you seeing in terms of people just holding on to trauma for so long?
I think people tend to push it down, like you said, until they can't push it down anymore. And when I see it, it's starting to affect other aspects of their lives.
Mm-hmm.
And when we start digging deep, it always goes back to childhood, and everyone comes in like, oh, but my childhood was fine. it's this thing, but then it always tends to lead back to something happened in their childhood.
I'm curious because generally when I see it in my clients, when childhood trauma begins or something in childhood happened that causes traumatic response, I see it usually between the ages of 4 and 9. What ages do you typically see?
Yeah, I think that's really common. I see that a lot, 4 to sometimes up to 12, but I think, yeah, sometimes 3, but yeah, I think that's kind of the core when the first incident or something happened. They didn't get what they needed as a child.
Absolutely. And I don't think people understand the level of severity when something happens in childhood. People will say children are resilient. I don't believe that, because if they were resilient, then I wouldn't have so many adults in my office dealing with childhood trauma. I think that children can kind of push it down a lot quicker than adults, but it will always come up.
Yes, and I think children are resilient in the way that it's got them into adulthood.
Mm-hmm.
So they were able to survive by dealing with it, maybe internalizing shame or guilt, self-blame, and it's got them into adulthood until that doesn't work anymore. And then, yes, we see them in our office.
Absolutely. What do you see happens in the person's life when they're finally realize, okay, it's time. I need to go to therapy. Something isn't right. What kind of triggers them to come in?
Oh, all sorts of things. Problems in their relationship, problems at work, not feeling settled, overeating, drinking, you name it. All the things that, we can use to continue just to suppress our feelings or push it onto someone else. It's someone else's fault.
Yes. A lot of coping mechanisms, unhealthy coping.
Yes.
And they finally admit it, or they maybe see that, okay, something isn't right.
Right.
And they take that first step, which is always the hardest.
It is always the hardest.
How can someone navigate the grieving process? So we'll switch scripts here over really based on grief because, of course, as the listeners may or may not know, I lost my brother last year to suicide. So the grieving process has been very tricky for myself, for my family. It is a nightmare. And the fact that we lost my brother still absolutely makes no sense to any of us. So I'm still stuck. I don't even know if I have even grieved yet. My brain still can't believe that happened. So do you see that when someone has lost someone very close to them by suicide or some kind of death that is out of nowhere, they had no idea, and they don't even know where to start in grieving?
Well, first, I want to say I'm really sorry for your loss. That is a huge, huge hole.
It's a gaping, massive hole, but thank you.
And where to start, it is when something is that's a traumatic loss. And when something is a trauma, it is very unsettling and it throws people off balance, and then they don't know where to go, what to do, how to help themselves. And sometimes the best course of action is just to keep moving on in life, pushing it down until it's the appropriate time and you're ready. So I see that a lot, is that people get on with it. Some people are shocked by it. I don't think there is an unhealthy way to grieve. If people need more time and they're ready, maybe 3 years later, to deal with the loss, then that's the right time. Absolutely. So I think it's okay to pause until it does feel right and you're ready.
Yes. Yeah. And I'm right there. I don't even think I've grieved yet. It's been over a year and my brain almost won't let me even go there.
Right. Exactly.
It's like,
exactly.
Don't even.
And I think I value that. It is a part of you that's trying to protect you because you're not ready to go there.
Absolutely. I think it's too traumatic to go there. What ways does grief impact mental health? What are common emotional responses that you see individuals experience?
a broad range, and not only emotional responses, but behavioral responses, physical responses to grief. um, Emotional responses can be anger, can be guilt, it can be denial, sadness, loneliness, overwhelm, sometimes relief in some cases. Behavioral responses could be, thoughts of suicide for themselves. Can't make decisions, trouble concentrating. It can also manifest as pain in the body. So there's just such a broad range of responses. Crisis of faith is common as well.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. When you lose someone so close to you, all of a sudden you're like, what? You question everything.
Yeah.
You know, all the
Why
foundations.
did this happen?
Why?
Mm-hmm.
So when you get someone who is maybe feeling a lot of guilt, or they just can't seem to process this, what kind of therapeutic approaches are your go-tos?
Continuing to validate and normalize, because sometimes we get in our own way and think, oh, well, I shouldn't be feeling this. And we get that externally as well, like you should move on, or you shouldn't be feeling guilt, or and I think if we can just allow ourselves to feel all of those emotions, that's the best way to get through them.
And I see that even when people don't experience grief, they don't want to experience emotions. And that's why they end up grabbing the alcohol or grabbing the drugs.
Right.
So they don't want to sit in the feelings because it's so painful.
It's so painful.
All right. I know you are well trained in accelerated resolution therapy, which I love. I am very interested in getting certified in EMDR, and I know this is a branch of it. So if you could just talk a little bit about how you use art in your sessions when someone is going through grief and trauma.
Well, as you know, art is developed from EMDR, and so it's very similar. It's an eye movement therapy. And how I describe it to clients, it's like magic, because that's the only way that we understand how it works. We really don't understand the brain enough. But when someone's really stuck on a particular memory or on a particular thought, it can be really helpful to kind of get past that. And so I use it with stuck points in therapy.
Do you use this with like veterans or military who have PTSD?
Yes.
Yeah. And how quickly do you see them get unstuck?
Sometimes, depending on if it's a single event trauma, sometimes after one session.
Wow. So in less than an hour, they can get unstuck from one like memory that they just can't seem to get off of.
Yeah. And even if it's not completely unstuck, there's a definite movement.
Wow. And are these just, so is it a series of questions you ask as they do the eye movements?
It's them reprocessing that memory. So I have them go through the memory a couple times. And then we go in and change the memory, and we process physical sensations in the body.
How important is it for people to process everything? Emotions, feelings, like everything. I process what happens, even just in everyday life. How important do you think that is?
I think it's extremely important, because I think that really contributes a lot to people's problems in health. It affects us physically, as I said before, and affects our relationships in our work, at home. It can really affect how we interact with people.
And that's a great point, because I was going to ask how unresolved grief contributes to long-term mental health challenges. If you don't work through it, you don't process it, what kind of long-term mental health challenges do you find?
Yeah, persistent responses, so like we said before, one of the responses to grief is anger, let's say, and if it doesn't get really processed, then that anger will continue in multiple areas of their life. Some underlying anger, bitterness, resentment. That's just one example, but I think whatever emotion, if it's not processed, will stay buried and come out sideways, so to speak.
And you see that affecting physical health?
Physical health too, yes.
Yeah. And what kind of physical, like, do you see?
Chronic pain,
Yeah. So someone's in chronic pain, it could literally just be unresolved wounds or trauma in
Yeah.
their body. And I've been seeing a lot of stuff about like somatic stretching or somatic yoga. I don't know if you've seen that, but it really focuses on points of your body where you could be holding on to a lot of trauma.
Yeah,
So,
there's a lot of work with somatic stuff, and it is really interesting. There's actually a therapy. I'm not super familiar with it, but it's where a mental health therapist works with a massage therapist. And it is specific to getting into the body and where
oh,
the
wow.
trauma is.
So you would have your mental health session while you're getting a massage?
Well,
Or-
it's not quite like that. I don't know exactly how it works. I'm very intrigued by it and haven't looked it up myself, but I have heard the link of the two.
That's interesting. I love that. Of course, mind and body go together.
Yes.
So it makes sense.
Yes. Yeah.
Now, Catherine wrote a book, an amazing book about grief, and it is titled, What Do I Say? And it's how to support others in grief. I think this is so amazing. You can get this on Amazon as well, because when my brother passed, nobody knew what to say. And I don't blame them. I don't know if I would know what to say either. But one thing Catherine does point out is to reach out. Sometimes people don't know what to say, so they just don't say anything. And that can, in turn, be extremely hurtful. But people you would expect would say something.
Yeah.
But they just don't know what to say. At one of the pages, she says, don't offer trite sayings. So she gives examples of what not to say. So if you want to expand a little bit more on why you wouldn't just say he's in a better place, or, at least they aren't suffering anymore, why expand a little bit more on those?
So I think most people try to offer comfort and want to help the person feel better, which I know that comes from a good place. And so we try to say, oh, it's okay, in various ways. We're saying it's okay, like those trite sayings. And if that person isn't there yet, it can be very invalidating.
Absolutely.
Because it's kind of short-circuiting. You need to grieve the loss and feel sad and feel angry and feel all those feelings, and that is okay. And when we try to offer something to help you feel differently, that's invalidating what you are feeling in that moment.
Absolutely. And the next page, I think, is even hits close to home here. Don't tell your lost stories. So when Joey passed, and I know people were coming from a good place.
Yeah.
Of course, because they don't know what to say. So they would talk about when they lost their grandpa, who was 90, which was sad. But to compare that to a 37-year-old who is, not here anymore, suddenly is not comforting. In fact, I noticed it caused a lot of anger.
Yeah.
So on the do side, because I was going to say, what do you say? You can say, I understand you feeling some relief when your dad died. I felt something similar when I lost my mom. So I see how that is comforting, but it's not comparing something totally opposite.
Right.
So what would be your advice if in a suicide? What would be a good thing to say or proper?
Well, and I think it's okay. Like one of the things I talk about in there, first of all, be genuine. If you don't know what to say, just say that. Like, wow, I have no idea what you would be feeling. I would be feeling lost and abandoned and confused. Tell me how you are feeling.
Oh, I love that. And you say, just be a loving support. That's it.
Yeah.
Just be a loving support. Listen, acknowledge, validate. Don't avoid. Like avoidance, of course, not validating and not reaching out.
Right. And I think, like we said before in the beginning, is people tend to avoid uncomfortable emotions when they're theirs, but we also do that when they're someone else's. And so I think that's why people don't reach out, as they are trying to avoid those uncomfortable emotions and try to make people feel better when they can't.
Yes.
And they have to learn to sit in that discomfort with you.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very uncomfortable.
It is. It is very uncomfortable. So when we get into self-care, what self-care strategies do you think individuals could engage in while grieving? And how important is self-compassion when you're trying to heal?
So some good self-care strategies would be talking with friends that do get it. Journaling can be helpful. There are many great grief books out there that can be helpful. Exercise, meditation, overall just being gentle with yourself. And I think self-compassion is key, because I think, like I said before, we sometimes get in our own way and judge our responses, and that impedes the healing process.
Absolutely. When you lose someone from suicide, the guilt is overbearing because you feel like you could have done something.
Right.
Or why didn't I see this? Or why didn't I know? So when you get a client like that and they just are questioning the last few days and how they missed something, what do you generally recommend or say to them?
Well, and there is something I did mention, but I'm not going to be able to find it in here right now. But I think it's understandable and just validating that it's normal to feel guilty and thinking that you missed something.
Yeah.
And sometimes it takes time to realize that there really was nothing that you can do. And sometimes when someone's committed to ending their suffering, they do it, and you have no power over that.
Yeah. That's right. No matter how much you feel like you could have stopped it, they could have done it at any point.
Yeah.
After you stopped it the first time.
Exactly. If they're committed to ending their pain, they're going to find a way.
So as we wrap up and we talk about reducing the stigma around mental health, what do you think makes it easier for individuals to seek support?
I think, the point of your podcast is to reduce the stigma. It is okay to talk about feelings. It is okay to not be okay. And to get external support. Our society is so averse to asking for help.
Mm-hmm.
We have a very individualist society. And I think if we felt more comfortable asking for help and knowing that it's okay to ask for help.
It's okay to ask for help. Do you hear that? And what resources are available for those experiencing grief?
There's some groups in the community. The Life Center has various groups. I think during COVID they stopped them, but I think they've resumed their groups now. There's Grief Share. There's also, some people are associated with churches that have some grief groups. Halos specifically is a grief group for people that lost someone to suicide.
I never heard of that. Halos?
Yeah, Halos, HALOS. I think it's healing after loss of suicide.
Okay.
And then for individuals, for like individual counseling, the Life Center also offers individual therapy, also looking at Psychology Today, checking your insurance providers, finding someone that does have a specialty in grief.
Absolutely. And after my brother passed, I joined a suicide sibling group, and it was helpful. It was me and 7 other siblings who had gone through the same gruesome torture, which unfortunately we met that way, but they were all so sweet and we had a great connection. So that did help the healing process as well. But I refused to, go through that by myself, and I wanted people who understood that. So, Catherine, thank you so much for being on the show. How could somebody find you, reach out to you, or I know you own your own practice?
So my website is my name, CatherineHodge.com. That's Catherine with a C. And then you can always reach out and leave me a voicemail at 813-906-9660.
All right, perfect. Some big takeaways today. You are not alone, and don't be afraid to reach out for help. Do not be afraid to reach out for help, and it's okay to not be okay. Thank you so much for tuning in this week. Tune in next week as we listen to our next episode on the Just Help Out Mindset podcast.